Hello, everybody. Today we're going to be looking at the Gaza healthcare letters. There's a website called gazahealthcareletters.org where American healthcare workers who worked in Gaza have written an open letter to the White House. And if you go to this website, it'll show you lots of statistics and different things that have been going on in the Palestinian genocide that's been going on in Gaza and the West Bank. There's lots of little factoids here and there with like lots of photos, like this one in particular. You know, this is from Reuters. Absolutely horrifying, the level of death and destruction that has been carried out by the IOF, the Israeli occupation force. And so they kind of give a lot of explanation as to why, why do we write to the White House? Without U.S. support, the violence in Gaza will end immediately. The United States is Israel's crucial supplier of weapons, munitions, jet fuel, logistical, and maintenance support, diplomatic cover at the United Nations, and legal cover at the International Court of Justice and the International Criminal Court. Our taxes have provided tens of billions of dollars of lethal assistance to Israel since October 2023. It goes back way further than that, but this is what they're working with. Without our massive military support, the horrifying crimes we witnessed in Gaza will stop immediately. Americans do not want to spend tens of billions of dollars shooting children, dropping bombs on refugees, starving pregnant women, and torturing nurses and doctors. We felt compelled to speak out about these crimes because we, as Americans, are directly involved with them. So this kind of, this whole thing, brings to light the fact that, American people are also complicit in this genocide. That there's a very large portion of people that feel a great amount of personal responsibility, that, the fact that not everybody is questioning the government, not everybody is questioning the practices of the president and vice president in this situation, and not everyone is really calling out these horrifying crimes. So we're going to go ahead and read the full thing. I'll actually leave a link in the description for this so that you guys can go ahead and take a look at it and download it and read it if you want to. There's lots of statistics in it. There's lots of really brutal details. So this is kind of like a trigger warning for that if you cannot stomach that sort of thing. I know that this is not a very light and airy and fun topic to discuss, but it's real and it's something that needs to be discussed and should be shared, I think. Let me also just go ahead and say, if you like what I do, if you like my videos, then please let me know in the comments, subscribe, like the video, all that sort of stuff. It really helps me out. It gives me more feedback on what I'm doing, and it helps me understand, where I'm going and what I'm trying to do with this platform. And with all that said, let's go ahead and get into it. Letter to President Biden and Vice President Harris. An open letter from American medical professionals who served in Gaza. So this was written October 2nd, 2024. Dear President Biden and Vice President Harris, we are 99 American physicians, surgeons, nurse practitioners, nurses, and midwives who have volunteered in the Gaza Strip since October 7, 2023. Combined, we spent 254 weeks volunteering in Gaza's hospitals and clinics. We worked with various non-governmental organizations, NGOs, and the World Health Organization in hospitals and clinics throughout the Strip. In addition to our medical and surgical expertise, many of us have a public health background, as well as experience working in humanitarian and conflict zones, including Ukraine during the brutal Russian invasion. Some of us are veterans and reservists. We are a multi-faith and multi-ethnic group. None of us support the horrors committed on October 7 by Palestinian armed groups and individuals in Israel. Okay, so it acknowledges that Israelis actually, the IOF actually did commit some war crimes on that day, not to mention that they were actually aware of it way before it happened, but that's besides the point. The Constitution and the World Health Organization states, quote, "The health of all peoples is fundamental to the attainment of peace and security and is dependent on the fullest cooperation of individuals and states," unquote. It is in this spirit that we write to you in this open letter. We are among the only neutral observers who have been permitted to enter the Gaza Strip since October 7. Given our broad expertise and direct experience of working throughout Gaza, we are uniquely positioned to comment on several matters of importance to our government as it decides whether to continue supporting Israel's attack on and siege of the Gaza Strip. Specifically, we believe we are well positioned to comment on the massive human toll from Israel's attack on Gaza, especially the toll it has taken on women and children. This letter collects and summarizes our own experiences and direct observations in Gaza. The letter is accompanied by a detailed appendix summarizing the publicly available information from media, humanitarian, and academic sources on key aspects of Israel's invasion of Gaza. Both this letter and the appendix are available electronically at gazahealthcareletters.org, this website that I'm reading it from currently. This website also houses letters from Canadian and British healthcare workers to their respective governments, making many similar observations to those herein. This letter and the appendix show probative evidence that the human death toll in Gaza since October is far higher than is understood in the United States. It is likely that the death toll from this conflict is already greater than 118,908 people, an astonishing 5.4% of Gaza's population. Our government must act immediately to prevent an even worse catastrophe than what has already befallen the people of Gaza and Israel. A ceasefire must be imposed on the warring parties by withholding military support for Israel and supporting an international arms embargo on Israel and all Palestinian armed groups. Now, I personally disagree with an arms embargo on Palestinian armed groups because they're just fighting for resistance. They're fighting a war of occupation. They are actually just defending themselves. So that's one part of it that I kind of disagree with, but what can you do? We believe our government is obligated to do this, both under American law and international humanitarian law. We also believe it is the right thing to do. Quote, I've never seen such horrific injuries on such a massive scale with so few resources. Our bombs are cutting down women and children by the thousands. Their mutilated bodies are a monument to cruelty. Dr. Ferozi Sidwa, trauma and critical care surgeon, Veterans Affairs General Surgeon. With only marginal exceptions, everyone in Gaza is sick, injured, or both. This includes every national aid worker, every international volunteer, and probably every Israeli hostage, every man, woman, and child. While working in Gaza, we saw widespread malnutrition in our patients and our Palestinian healthcare colleagues. Every one of us lost weight rapidly in Gaza despite having privileged access to food and having taken our own supplementary nutrient-dense food with us. We have photographic evidence of life-threatening malnutrition in our patients, especially children, that we are eager to share with you. Virtually every child under the age of 5 whom we've encountered, both inside and outside the hospital, had both a cough and watery diarrhea. We found cases of jaundice, indicating hepatitis A infection under such conditions. In nearly every room of the hospitals in which we served and in many of our healthcare colleagues in Gaza. An astonishingly high percentage of our surgical incisions became infected from the combination of malnutrition, impossible operating conditions, lack of basic sanitation supplies such as soap, and lack of surgical supplies and medication, including antibiotics. Malnutrition led to widespread spontaneous abortions, underweight newborns, and an inability of new mothers to breastfeed. This left their newborns at high risk of death given the lack of access to potable water anywhere in Gaza. Many of those infants died. In Gaza, we watched malnourished mothers feed their underweight newborn infants formula made with poisonous water. We can never forget that the world abandoned these innocent women and babies. Every day I saw babies die. They had been born healthy. Their mothers were so malnourished that they could not breastfeed, and we lacked formula or clean water to feed them, so they starved. Asma Taha, pediatric nurse practitioner. God, this is just so rough. This is hard to read, hard to get through. I'm sorry, I apologize. We urge you to realize that epidemics are raging in Gaza. Israel's continued repeated displacement of the malnourished and sick population of Gaza, half of whom are children, to areas without running water or even toilets available is absolutely shocking. It was and remains guaranteed to result in widespread death from viral and bacterial diarrheal diseases and pneumonias, particularly in children under the age of 5. Indeed, even the dreaded polio virus has reemerged in Gaza due to the combination of systematic destruction of the sanitation infrastructure, widespread malnutrition weakening immune systems, and young children having missed routine vaccinations for nearly an entire year. We worry that unknown thousands have already died from the lethal combinations of malnutrition and disease, and that tens of thousands more will die in the coming months, especially with the onset of the winter rains in Gaza. Most of them will be young children. Taking a second away from the text here. This is all systematically being carried out. This is done with full intentionality by Israel, by the Israeli government. This is not all done by some sort of accident. You know, this is a genocide through and through, fully intentionally. This is what they've been trying to do for years. This is what they have been doing already for the last 70-something years. And its intensification and its level of broadcast to the world is unrivaled at this point. We're basically seeing the Holocaust happening again in real time, except this time it's happening to Palestinians. I apologize for this next line. This is really difficult to read. Gaza was the first time I held a baby's brains in my hand, the first of many. Dr. Mark Perlmutter, orthopedic and hand surgeon. Children are universally considered innocents in armed conflict. However, every single signatory to this letter saw children in Gaza who suffered violence that must have been deliberately directed at them. Specifically, every one of us who worked in an emergency intensive care or surgical setting treated preteen children who were shot in the head or chest on a regular or even a daily basis. It is impossible that such widespread shooting of young children throughout Gaza, sustained over the course of an entire year, is accidental or unknown to the highest Israeli civilian and military authorities. Like I said, it's completely, one second away from the text. This is exactly what I'm talking about. It is fully intentional and deliberate. President Biden and Vice President Harris, we wish you could see the nightmares that plague so many of us since we have returned. Dreams of children maimed and mutilated by our weapons and their inconsolable mothers begging us to save them. We wish you could hear the cries and screams our consciences will not let us forget. We cannot fathom... I'm sorry. We cannot fathom why you continue arming the country that is deliberately killing these children en masse. I saw so many stillbirths and maternal deaths that could have been easily prevented if the hospitals had been functioning normally. Dr. Thala Pakianakis, obstetrician and gynecologist. The pregnant and breastfeeding women we treated were particularly malnourished. Those of us who worked with pregnant women who regularly saw stillbirths and maternal deaths that were easily preventable in any developed country's healthcare system. The rate of infection in C-section incisions was astonishing. Women underwent vaginal deliveries and even C-sections without anesthesia and were given nothing but Tylenol afterwards because no other pain medications were available. We all observed emergency departments overwhelmed by patients seeking treatment for chronic medical conditions such as renal failure, hypertension, and diabetes. Aside from trauma patients, most ICU beds were occupied by patients with type 1 diabetes who no longer had access to insulin. The lack of medication availability, the widespread loss of electricity and refrigeration, and inconsistent access to food made managing this disease impossible. Israel has destroyed more than half of Gaza's healthcare resources and has killed nearly 1,000 Palestinian healthcare workers, more than 1 out of every 20 healthcare workers in Gaza. At the same time, healthcare needs have increased massively from the lethal combination of military violence, malnutrition, disease, and displacement. The hospitals where we worked were starved of basic supplies, from surgical material to soap. They were regularly cut off from electricity and internet access, denied clean water, and operated at 4 to 7 times their bed capacity. Every hospital was overwhelmed beyond the breaking point by displaced persons seeking safety, by the constant stream of sick and malnourished patients seeking care, and by the huge influx of serious wounded patients who typically arrived in mass casualty events. These observations and the publicly available material detailed in the appendix lead us to believe that the death toll from this conflict is many times higher than what is reported by the Gaza Ministry of Health. We also believe this is probative evidence of widespread violations of American laws governing the use of American weapons abroad and of international humanitarian law. We cannot forget scenes of unbearable cruelty directed at women and children that our government is a direct participant in. As we met our healthcare colleagues in Gaza, it was clear that they were malnourished and both physically and mentally devastated. We quickly learned that our Palestinian healthcare colleagues were among the most traumatized people in Gaza and perhaps the entire world. Like virtually all people in Gaza, okay, 1 second away from the text. Imagine us, me, like specifically talking about Americans who are on social media, who see videos of what's going on, see the videos of babies with their heads blown off or with people having their entire organs strewn about on the ground, you know, like people that are just piles of meat. being videoed on a phone. Imagine how it feels to be those people, not only that suffered those deaths, but the people who have to pick up the pieces and hold their dead family members' bodies, who have to take them to a stretcher, to take them to a hospital or some sort of healthcare clinic that has no resources. Imagine being one of those people. There is no way that I can condemn Hamas or condemn the Palestinians for any actions that they take in response to the level of violence that Israel has carried out upon these people. No way. And the leader, one of the leaders of Hamas, was just killed. Sinwar. He was just killed. Rest in peace. Rest in power, my friend. Meanwhile, Netanyahu is in hiding. He's a fucking coward. Back to the text. Like virtually all people in Gaza, they had lost family members and their homes. Most lived in and around their hospitals with their surviving family in unimaginable conditions. Although they continued working a grueling schedule, they had not been paid since October 7. They've just been trying to survive. All were acutely aware that their work as healthcare providers had marked them as targets for Israel. This makes a mockery of the protected status hospitals and healthcare providers are granted under the oldest and most widely accepted provisions of international humanitarian law. We met healthcare personnel in Gaza who worked at hospitals that had been raided and destroyed by Israel. Many of these colleagues of ours were taken by Israel during the attacks. They all told us a slightly different version of the same story. In captivity, they were barely fed, continuously physically and psychologically abused, and finally dumped naked on the side of the road. Many told us they were subjected to mock executions and other forms of mistreatment and torture. Far too many of our healthcare colleagues told us they were simply waiting to die. The 99 signatories of this letter spent a combined 254 weeks inside Gaza's largest hospitals and clinics. We wish to be absolutely clear. Not once did any of us see any type of Palestinian militant activity in any of the Gaza's hospitals or other healthcare facilities. Let me read that again. We wish to be absolutely clear. Not once did any of us see any type of Palestinian militant activity in any of Gaza's hospitals or other healthcare facilities. Israel's not targeting Hamas. Israel is targeting Palestinians. They are straight up targeting civilians and healthcare workers and children and women. That's who they're trying to fucking kill. We urge you to see that Israel has systematically and deliberately devastated Gaza's entire healthcare system, and that Israel has targeted our colleagues in Gaza for torture, disappearance, and murder. President Biden and Vice President Harris, any solution to this problem must begin with an immediate and permanent ceasefire. We appreciate that you are working on a ceasefire agreement. We appreciate that you are working on a ceasefire agreement between Israel and Hamas, but you have overlooked an obvious fact. The United States can impose a ceasefire on the warring parties by simply stopping arms shipments to Israel and announcing that we will participate in an international arms embargo on both Israel and all Palestinian armed groups. We stress what many others have repeatedly told you over the past year. American law is perfectly clear on this matter. Continuing to arm Israel is illegal. President Biden and Vice President Harris, we urge you to immediately withhold military, economic, and diplomatic support from the State of Israel and to participate in an international arms embargo of Israel and all Palestinian armed groups until a permanent ceasefire is established in Gaza, including the release of all Israeli and Palestinian hostages, and until a permanent resolution of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is negotiated between the two parties. Vice President Harris, as the likely next president of the United States, we urge you to publicly announce your support for such a policy and to state publicly that you are duty-bound to uphold the laws of the United States, even when doing so is politically inconvenient. This was written 22 days ago. Today's the 23rd, 21 days ago. And I haven't heard anything from Kamala. All I've heard is just continued political lambasting against Trump, and also I've only heard and seen her try to win Republicans to her side by lurching even further and further to the right that she already is. President Biden and Vice President Harris, we are 99 American physicians and nurses who have witnessed crimes beyond comprehension, crimes that we cannot believe you wish to continue supporting. Please meet with us to discuss what we saw and why we feel American policy in the Middle East must change immediately. In the meantime, we reiterate what we wrote in our letter of July 25th, 2024. The Rafah crossing between Gaza and Egypt must be immediately reopened and must allow unfettered aid delivery by recognized international humanitarian organizations. Security screening of aid deliveries must be conducted by an independent international inspection regime instead of by Israeli forces. These screenings must be based on a clear, unambiguous, and published list of forbidden items, and with a clear, independent international mechanism for challenging forbidden items, as verified by the UN Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs in the Occupied Palestinian Territory. A bare minimum of water allocation of 15 liters of potable water per person per day, and the Sphere Handbook minimum in a humanitarian emergency must be allocated to the population of Gaza as verified by UN Water. I'm sorry. I'm trying to keep it together. This is really difficult. Full and unrestricted access of medical and surgical professionals and medical and surgical equipment to the Gaza Strip must be resumed. This must include items taken in healthcare professionals' personal luggage to safeguard their proper storage, sterility, and timely delivery as verified by the World Health Organization. Incredibly, Israel continues to block healthcare workers of Palestinian descent from working in Gaza, even American citizens. This makes a mockery of the American ideal that, quote, all men are created equal, unquote, and degrades both our national ideals and our profession. Our work is life-saving. Our Palestinian healthcare colleagues in Gaza are desperate for relief and protection, and they deserve both. We are not politicians. We do not claim to have all the answers. We are simply healing professionals who cannot remain silent about what we saw in Gaza. Every day that we continue supplying weapons and munitions to Israel is another day that women are shredded by our bombs and children are murdered with our bullets. President Biden and Vice President Harris, we urge you, end the madness now. Sincerely. And they're all the names. They're all the names. The 99 healthcare workers that have signed this letter. Now imagine all of the children that could barely write their own names. All of the children that could write their names, but were killed. Imagine all the children that have survived, but are injured and malnourished and are now amputees that don't have hands or feet. They can't write their name. They can't speak. There are far bigger things going on than you and I. There are far bigger problems than what you and I in the first world are dealing with. I feel like I'm going crazy seeing this stuff every single day. And it's because of Western imperialism, capitalism. And don't give me any of that fucking horseshit where you're like, oh, now he's getting political. Dude, these are dead children. This is a genocide. It's all political. It is because of Western imperialism, Western hegemony, American imperialism, that Israel as a state currently exists at all in the first place. It is because of Christian Zionism and the more general Zionist movement that invaded Palestine and displaced all of those Palestinians of their homes during the first Nakba. May the Palestinians have peace. May the Palestinians have peace, inshallah. I'm not going to ask you to start a petition on your own. I'm not going to ask you to write to your local representative or something limp like that, okay? Because we're far past that point. We need working people in the imperial core, as well as other links in the chain of imperialism, of global imperialist capitalism, to end the madness. To stand up for what's right. Join an organization. Join a party. Fight and resist. Because my brothers and sisters in Palestine are dying. My brothers and sisters in Palestine are dying at the hands of American-made bombs and weapons. And if you cannot see that, and if you cannot call them your brothers and sisters, then I'm sorry, there is nothing that I can say to you.